So, another very similar dynamic that we had in our lives as pertained to our parents is both of our mothers were very strong, prominent voices in the home, very strong, kind of like leadership roles among the family. Whereas our fathers were both the laid back ones of the house, real chill. They both were amazing chefs and they both loved to cook.
Yes.
And they kind of, sat back and, let the wives do what they do, saying do their thing. And they kind of chilled and they were the more, I'll just say the more relaxed of the two parents. But
Right.
they both were outstanding chefs and loved to cook.
Mm-hmm.
So that was also very interesting once we started talking and seeing that dynamic was so similar.
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything?
Um, yeah, I think that I don't know. It's really interesting um, that our moms were both so such leaders, and our dads were both super laid back, kind of like the old happy wife, happy life type of
Exactly.
dynamic going on there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Another thing that was kind of funny in the similarity was growing up in our early childhood. I would say up to, well, for me it kind of continued because of me playing sports. But what would you say the kind of the neighborhood revolving around the basketball court? How long did that last for you? You think?
Yeah, man, I moved there when I was like 7 and left when I was 17, so like 10
All the way
years.
up to high school. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So same thing. So both of us grew up in neighborhoods where, like the social center, the kind of the place where life revolved around for the kids in the neighborhood was the basketball court.
Yes.
I got very very much into sports as I became an older child. I mean I loved basketball from a very young age. Probably 7, 8, 9 area. I really really got into it to the point where I was kind of a weird kid. I was one of those kids that I would literally inhale anything about basketball that I could find. I was reading. My pops had a subscription to the Sporting News magazine. I don't know if y'all remember that. Kind of taking you back. And this was also back during the time. Now we're showing our age here. Back when newspapers were a big thing, and newspapers would get delivered to your house. The local city or county paper would come daily, and then you had the big one that would come every weekend. Uh, where I grew up in St. Louis, the big one was the St. Louis Post Dispatch, and so I would read all the basketball content in my pops' sport news magazine. When the paper would come, I would literally, be the first one, go grab it real quick, flip through it, get to the sports section, find all the information on the NBA. I would read every single piece of information I could find relating to the NBA, the players, the news. I was one of those guys that I was collecting basketball cards as well. So I could tell you just about the entire roster of every single NBA team, top to bottom, starters, bench players, who was up on the trading block, who was injured. I could tell you their jersey number, their stats, what college they went to, what their stats were in college. It got to the point where the library was a very big part of our lives growing up as well. We actually lived, in my family, we lived very close to the neighborhood library. And so I was going to the library and I was checking out books on basketball. I mean, once I exhausted like the normal books, like little kiddie autobiographies of players and stuff like that, I was getting books on the history of the game. I was reading like nerd level stuff like a breakdown of the rules and the history of the rule changes and stuff on Dr. James Naismith, who is credited with um, discovering or creating basketball, which is a whole nother story, but that's a lie. It's much older than Dr. Naismith. But I was getting books on coaching, like coaching strategies and different play sets and how they would run. And literally, like as a child, a little child, I was reading coaching books. I was checking out VHS tapes on drills and shooting form and defensive drills and conditioning and anything, any and everything I could get my hands on regarding basketball. I was on it. I was on it. And she had a very similar dynamic with the basketball court in her neighborhood.
Yeah, and I actually loved basketball too. That was kind of one of the things I used to do with my pops. Just watch the games with him, and my house was literally right next to the basketball court, like within throwing distance. And so my house was let's go to Ceresa's house and get a drink out the hose. Them days when we drank out of the water hose.
It's a lost art.
Yes. So hours and hours were spent at the basketball court, which led to, we had stories that we swapped that were so similar. It was kind of scary because we were in completely different states, but it just shows you that the basketball court doesn't change where you're at. It doesn't change what happens, what goes on there.
At all. Hooping is hooping in every hood. Don't matter if you're in the hood, if you're in the suburbs, it doesn't matter. The dynamics of the court is universal. Mm-hmm. It's universal.
Yes, absolutely.
I guess we can, so I'll just add this on because it's related. So some of those similar stories that we swapped as far as the social center of the basketball court was, so y'all know, like back in the day, when we were coming up, these kids nowadays, they all soft and they only know about electronics, but we played out. We played outside all day. As soon as the sun came up, we was out there, especially in the summertime.
Yes.
And we wasn't coming in till the street lights came on. And it didn't matter if it was 110 degrees. We drink out the water hose and keep it pushing. You came in and out the house too much anyway. Mom's liable to make you stay in. Don't keep coming in and out of my house. So back then growing up, things were super, super competitive amongst the boys of the neighborhood. And all this participation trophy madness. It's ill preparing children for the reality of life as they grow up and get older. Yes. There's winners and losers. There's standards you have to meet. There is certain. That's really all it is. There's winners and losers. Everybody doesn't get a prize just for being a part, right, just for participating. You have to be better than the next person to reach certain goals, to get a job, to get that promotion you're looking for, that raise, to have the best grade in your class if you're in college. That there's, it just is what it is. Dog eat dog world, so they say. Mm-hmm. And that hyper competitive dynamic when we were growing up was, it could get a little out of hand sometimes, but it was, in a lot of ways, I think it was good. It was good. It shaped us and molded us for some of the harsher realities of adult life. And like amongst the boys in the neighborhood where I was growing up, we had a lot of good amount of boys. So we was going at it about everything. Everything was a competition. So it wasn't just basketball. I actually had one of my best friends growing up, stayed a couple houses down from me. His family boxed. And so it was basketball, it was boxing. They bring the gloves out and let's go. We doing, hood tournaments for boxing to see who could win the most matches, and you go to somebody quick. It was bike riding, who could do a wheelie the longest, who could do the craziest trick, who could ride the most people on your pegs. You got a person on the pegs, on the back, on the front, somebody sitting on the handlebars, who could ride the longest with no hands. Baseball, football. Don't even get me started on the football. And we was playing. I lived right next to an alley. Alleys aren't even a thing anymore now, anyway. But we had an alley, that had like the cobblestone or brick pavement in the alley. That's like some old school inner city stuff, if you know what I'm talking about. But our house was literally the first house next to the alley where the big dumpsters were, and because that was the closest wide open space, that's where a lot of our sporting events took place, including football. And look, hey, if you don't want to get busted up, fall on the brick pavement, then you better be good. You better juke somebody. You know what I'm saying? You better get tough. And we started calling them the Hood Olympics, where if a couple of dudes, if the competition got a little too heated, it's time to prove a point now. And you would you would proceed to have an entire set of events,
Yes.
where you would compete against each other, and the squad, everybody around would be there keeping score, and they would be the judges, the umpire, the crowd, and and you had to compete, and we play. I mean, we would play every competitive sport / event you could think of to see who was the better man. You know what I mean? We playing soccer, baseball, basketball, football. I mean, we doing cartwheels. We doing foot races, and you had to win. And if somebody else won, then you couldn't wait to get to the next event so you could get your lick back. And don't let somebody outdo you too bad in the event, and everybody reacting and I got you, and it would enrage you so much. You just had to get that back. But we were talking about that too with the Hood Olympics.
Yes, absolutely. Competing and stuff nobody has no business doing.
No business. Stuff that we really didn't even have an interest in or any experience in.
Nobody plays soccer.
Nobody plays soccer. But it was on the list because if you something you could do and win and prove that you was better than so-and-so, hey, we doing it. We didn't even know how to play soccer, but we tried it. we tried it.
Right.
So that was just another thing that was attached to kind of that social center of the basketball court. So we had a lot of funny stories about Hood Olympics that I won't bore you with all the details, but very, very, very similar experiences with that. It was hilarious. It was hilarious. Did you have anything you wanted to add on that? So kind of switching gears just a little bit. So that was a lot of and we'll get back to some of that. That was some of the natural things that there were kind of mirrored aspects in, and I'm trying to get through this and not bog down with too many specific details because we've had hundreds of thousands of hours of conversation about our lives, and as we go through with our story, more things will come up. We'll talk about it, but for the sake of time, we'll kind of switch gears a little bit and talk about some of the spiritual aspects that even though I grew up in church and she did not, there was still even some mirrored aspects in that. And we both were babysat a lot, where our parents were both very, very busy. They had a lot of stuff going on. So in our younger years, we spent a lot of time at other people's houses, whether it be, family or very, very close friends. There's a lot of sleepovers, some just for leisure, some out of necessity, depending on what our parents had going on. And if you know anything about kids being over, or children, my bad. If you know anything about children being over at people's houses throughout just the history of our society, and it's only getting worse, unfortunately. There's a lot of foolishness that goes on when children are getting babysat or when they're having sleepovers and things like that. Even sometimes with people that the parents trust implicitly, the people they trust and love the most. When the children are away from their parents and out under their covering and unprotected, the enemy has been, unfortunately, highly successful in causing a lot of damage to a lot of children in those situations. And that's another thing that we talked about a lot, that we spent a lot of time being babysat at other people's houses and at our own homes and sleepovers and stuff. But Yah's hand of protection was on us very strongly, in that we were covered. And we were never victims of, some of the unspeakable things that happens to children when they're in those situations.
Yes, we were absolutely being protected, for sure. I have memories of, I had a Barbie car when I was little. I was probably like maybe 4 or 5. Y'all know the little cars that you can actually drive. And mine was a pink Barbie Jeep, and I somehow got a hold of a, showing our age again, the old cassette tapes, little boom box, little kitty boom box, and I got a hold of my parents' Color Me Bad cassette tape. And so I have memories of me like driving around the neighborhood in my pink Barbie car, just bumping Color Me Bad, like little girls have no business. No business talking about I want to sex you up. Like, don't even know what that is. But yeah, that just, that just shows that my guardian angels were probably like, oh my God.
Dragging wings.
But I was definitely being protected for sure. And that's something, our parents were both sets of parents were very hardworking. They made sure, like we said, they made sure we had everything we needed, and so they worked a lot of hours. And at one point, my parents had like 70 music students a week, which is unheard of if you have ever, taught music. But yeah, so the protection was definitely there. We both also had a lot of generational stuff on both sides of both of our families. And this is something that you don't really fully understand or realize until you become an adult. And most people don't even know that generational curses are a thing.
Right.
And so as we both, we really grew up together because we, I was 19 when we got together and he was 20. So we spent literally all of our early 20s were spent together, and we've spent hours and hours hashing over our lives and just coming into the realization of some of the things that were going on that you don't really fully understand until you're an adult. So we had, like in my family, there was alcoholism on both sides. There was some come to find out some Freemasonry, and so when I was very, very small, I was dealing with some, what I came to understand was some, demonic oppression, and I was being, a lot of sleep paralysis, a lot of things that that terrified me, but I didn't know how to express, because even at that very young age, I just felt like I was crazy, and so I better keep this to myself, because I can't tell a grown-up that I'm hearing voices that are telling me to do bad things, because then they're gonna lock me up. And that just shows you that it was demonic, because how does a little tiny girl know that that hearing voices makes you crazy, which leads to you being locked up?
Right.
So yeah, I was dealing with a lot of things that I didn't know were spiritual, but growing up and realizing, you come to know the cause and the effect. So I believe that it was definitely some generational stuff that hadn't been dealt with, and which resulted in a lot of early demonic oppression. So that's another area where Yah protected me, even though I was going through it. I was able to press through instead of succumbing to that darkness, which I very well could have, and a lot of people do. So I'm very grateful that he brought me through that, and also grateful that hopefully I can use the experience and the wisdom to help others who might have dealt with similar circumstances and maybe didn't even know what it was. So but yeah, so we both grew up very, very social.
Oh, my bad. Before we move to the next part,
sorry.
Just dealing with that aspect on my end of it now, because we were raised in the church in my family. Yah was merciful in that even though there were some, generational things within my family, that kind of demonic oppression, I was sheltered from a lot of that because of the way that we were raised, because of my parents' faith. And I know I had a lot of people praying for us, and my grandparents on both sides were believers. And again, just being such a huge part of the church, I believe firmly that the Most High's hand of protection was on us because of the complete saturation in the faith that my family had and my parents had. And the fact that they were so committed and doing, to the best of their knowledge, the best of their ability, doing everything in their power to be in right standing with the Most High. Excuse me. And because of that, I know I was very spiritually sheltered from a lot of that. Like I didn't have the same kind of spiritual experiences that she did, as far as like the sleep paralysis and actually hearing voices and things like that. Some of the generational things I dealt with were a little less severe, I would say. And coming to find out, there were some really, really, really horrible, harsh things that had happened throughout my family line. But again, I believe the Most High, because of the decisions that my parents made, we were protected from a lot of those things that could have come upon us. But the things that kind of, were passed along, still had to deal with. There is a strong spirit of anger and a very strong temper that's kind of passed along through the males in my family that I contended with a lot growing up. And again, like I said, just, to protect the innocent, I won't say too much, but finding out that there were some really, really horrible things that happened throughout my lineage, that even involved my parents, that, again, because of their faith and their commitment to everything that they knew and understood about Yah and His Word, and living your life in holiness, and doing their absolute utmost to try to keep us from experiencing the same things that they had experienced. I believe that the Most High saw their hearts, He heard their prayer, and He honored those requests, and He shielded us from a lot of the more harsh aspects of the spiritual oppression that we could have been exposed to, especially considering the things that had happened throughout our family history. So, I just very, very grateful for that. When we get a little bit later on in the story about our actual relationship and being together and wanting to be married and things like that, I'll touch on it a little bit more. But there's also a lot of relationship issues that kind of exist throughout my family line with marriages and divorces and things like that. So, not being affected by that personally too much, because I was just a kid. I wasn't, in relationships yet. But there are some things that I saw turn up later as an adult that, reared its ugly head. And, thank Yah that He was merciful and gracious, and we were able to get through those things and not succumb to some of those generational curses,
Mm-hmm.
So sorry.
No, it's okay. And I will say that my parents were believers, but they were also dealing with a lot. Individually, my mom and my dad were dealing with a lot coming from, their backgrounds. And so it was, a combination of them not knowing because I never said anything, and them, having a lot, trying to get through their own stuff, which, we all have to do. So, yeah.